What's up? I'm Dan Fradenburgh. What's up? I'm Dan Fradenburgh. You're the internet. You're the Vincent Brothers. And this is for FIGGERRIDOUT.com. Today I'm talking to the Vincent Brothers, who are both lawyers. What's up? I'm Dan Fradenburgh. You're the internet. You're the Vincent Brothers. And this is for FIGGERRIDOUT.com. Today I'm talking to the Vincent Brothers, who are both lawyers. I know them through my commercial real estate circles, but a lot of people who watch this will ask, what on earth we're doing discussing the things that we're talking about? And Figure It Out is a show that it's about using attention to detail to adapt your business or career wherever it needs to go. Now, law is definitely on the list of things you need to have some grasp on, and none of us have enough time to do more than just helicopter in some sound bites, especially us today, because we only have about 45 minutes, right, boys?
That's right.
Cool. So Paul, Adam, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Adam, you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'll go for it. Yeah, my name's Adam. I am the younger brother with Paul Vincent here. We're attorneys with Vincent Esquire. We are also in real estate. We're from the Northeast Ohio area generally, Cleveland and Akron specifically. And yeah, we have our own little firm that we do focus on real estate and business and little estate planning and, just enjoy meeting people and getting on podcasts and doing fun stuff like this. And right. Paul, your turn to add a little. I'm going
to make this thing sparkle. Yeah, so we focus on entrepreneurs. Most of our clients are real estate entrepreneurs, but from essentially start to finish, our clients are acquiring assets. When they're doing that, they need to raise money. They need to put purchase agreements together. So we help with that side of it. And then as they grow and they grow their families and they want to do something with their stuff, then we help people with the estate planning side of things. Like, hey, where's your membership interest go in your LLC? Where do your real estate assets go if you were to kick the can, and where do you want your other assets to go? So that's what we spend our time on.
All right. Awesome. And it's really clear how important that is already, but let's hop right into it. What's the most common situation you guys run into where the person got themselves into very hot water because they didn't involve a lawyer fast enough?
One easy one is just someone getting into we could take a real estate purchase, for example. A lot of people think that commercial is not all that different than residential, so they'll put some residential purchase agreement that they got from Google or maybe from a different a single family side transaction they participated in. But there's a whole lot more to it. It's not overly complicated on the commercial side, but there are certain due diligence pieces that you want to look at. So that's for me the most obvious and common one for, I don't know if it's hot water, but it's starting off on the wrong foot. It's just essentially not knowing what you don't know right out of the gate, and that's why you pay professionals. Me and Adam, we certainly don't know everything. If there's something that we don't know, we reach out to older lawyers or more focused lawyers on a particular kind of project, and we kind of go from there.
Yeah, and I'll just add to it, even on leases and things like that, some folks don't think have the checklist of things to look for. And I remember I have a buddy who got in a 5-year commercial lease and then realized landlord says, I got to pay the property taxes. So that's a big one. Having that second set of eyes is very helpful. Hot water probably is more on the business side. Hiring and firing is something people usually make the call too late on. People enjoy hiring and building out the team and everything, but there really are a lot of things you need to consider and take your time on that and that process. And then, with firing, you don't want to kick it down the road, but you don't want to make it at the same time, you don't want a knee-jerk reaction and just decide that morning I'm letting this person go this afternoon and not have anything in place, so you have to have the documentation. Otherwise you're going to be thinking about this termination for the next number of years. So, you really should just get that, be sure you get that advice. You have somebody, if you don't have an HR person, there are consultants out there that can help. You get some legal advice, that sort of stuff.
If somebody's watching and they want to become a lawyer, what kind of questions are on the bar exam?
A whole bunch of them.
Oh, a lot of fun ones.
Yeah, lots. If somebody is interested in becoming a lawyer, the first thing you should do is go talk to some other lawyer, and not just one lawyer, but talk to like a handful of lawyers, because if there's 4 lawyers, there may be 3 of them that are really sad about it. So you want to make sure you talk to at least one sad one, because that could be you someday, and then one that seems to enjoy what they're doing. So I would start there if you're really interested in law school or becoming a lawyer, because they will actually give you real life kind of insight on what a lawyer's being like. Law school, bar exam has nothing to do with how you'll actually practice law and deal with humans and their legal problems.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and it's essentially more of a pressure cooker than like learning about the law. It's as much of that anyway. You know, it's law school is some teachers are different, but a lot of it is just kind of testing your ability to take on a lot of information, be able to process it, try to understand things, and then mostly just stress along with it. And so, you know, that's a lot of law school, which is a talent and is something that's good for your development if you can get through it. And then the bar exam's similar. The best advice I got was just keep answering questions. You'll see people running out in tears. Just keep answering questions. Yeah. That's really good advice. Keep your head down. You know, don't just get discouraged. Yeah, the questions, I mean, there's all kinds of them depending on your state and everything, but they're mostly just discouraging questions, just trying to beat you down, get your spirit down.
Crush your spirits.
So are they obscure cases? I always figured they'd be more about like famous cases.
In Ohio, yeah, actually, it's not that many specifics. I mean, you need to, in terms of cases. So there's law and there's general law about, say, contracts or real property or whatever areas they have torts. They have, I forget if they're 13 or something along those lines.
Yep.
And there's essentially an outline these education courses put out, and it's full of all this kind of general content. But a lot of it also is they give you information, and then you have to write an answer based on what they've told you. So if there is specific statutes, at least with our experience was, they'll give you the statute you need. So it's not as much that as it is being able to just process a lot of information for 3 days and not leave crying.
Yeah. Awesome. So then speaking of not crying, then which courses in law school are the most difficult? For the general public. I don't want you to sit there and say, it's like, I'm terrible at this part of the law, so don't hire me for this.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you all the terrible things I'm at. But I think civil procedure was one of the it's very early. It's your first class you take. So and it's you know, kind of your first interaction with law is a strange animal. It's not something you deal with day to day, and civil procedure is something you only deal with when you're in court. So for me, I actually surprisingly did well in that, but I felt it was the least comfortable and the least familiar of all the kind of practice areas.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones where we didn't have no lawyers when we got into it, but didn't have a lot of experience, you know, understanding the court system and the court process, and that's what civil procedure is. So it's all the foreign stuff, like it's the mechanism they've created in the law on how a case works, the rules. I think they describe as like, you know, the law is a lawsuit's kind of like a dance, and there's specific time periods and interactions and things and rules to the dance, and that's supposed to be what civil procedure is. So if you don't know that stuff, then it's like all kind of brand new, foreign, kind of strange stuff, and the lawyers like to hide the ball, so it's even more strange.
You mentioned foreign, and of course I lived abroad, and so I'm sensitive to when they borrow from other languages to involve themselves in any profession. Are like Latin terms part of the reason why civil procedure is tough, or is it just that it's just a brand new process? It's set in stone. You better know it, or else you're not going to be able to be a lawyer.
Yeah, that's part of it. I think the law actually is doing a little better, I think, in recent decades of kind of trying to make it a little less legalese and, you know, all the Latinate terms and everything. So it's getting a little better. But yeah, that's one element to it. You know, is the legalese that everybody's familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and if you want to specialize, you guys specialize in real estate. So how do you become a specialist in real estate?
So we focus most of our time on that area because it's what we like to do, and generally happier transactions. But depending on every state, there are actual specialties, like you can specialize, and specializing in a particular practice area in a state requires like a certain amount of continuing legal education courses, and then day-to-day time commitments to that practice area. So in Ohio, I can't advertise I'm a specialist in something because I don't want to do all the extra courses and stuff, but I can focus my time on one particular area where people will think I'm like maybe more specialized in it than other practice areas, which it is. So if you want to become kind of specialized in something, there's the course route, and the other route is just doing that practice area more than others. I think is probably the best.
But as far as law school goes, there's a few things in law, depending on law school, there's certain areas like intellectual property where you can kind of have a track, but on the whole, law school is a general studies experience, and you kind of get a little taste of every area. And your last year or two, you can take some specific courses to get more experience there. But yeah, it's not like the standard undergrad college where you're spending a lot of time and you're getting a degree that says something. Most law schools are just a general Juris Doctorate degree.
Okay. And so, and from what I understand, when you pass the bar exam, that means you're called a barrister. And I've also heard of attorneys and whatever, but what are the differences between these terms? Or are they just trying to make them sound fancy?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Fancy.
Yeah. I think wig styles, maybe.
We use Esquire, but that's just a lawyer. That's nothing.
Yeah, Esquire. Yeah, I always understood that Esquire actually meant I don't have a title, so you're going to call me this. But it's pretty common for lawyers to say Esquire because if enough lawyers use Esquire, then you start to have that association. Oh, okay, it must be.
Yeah,
must be a lawyer.
It's all the same. Attorney, lawyer, barrister is kind of an English. I think Great Britain that's what they say. But yeah, we're all attorneys or lawyers, or attorneys or lawyers over here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so if you've passed the bar exam and you haven't been disbarred, that means you can, like I'm just talking as far as like thinking of it sort of like a license, like a driver's license or something like that. It means you can represent somebody in court and the client can sue you if you are negligent in your representation. Is that correct? If you haven't been disbarred, then that's basically what you're getting for your money or what your role is, or am I off the mark on that?
Yeah. It's you're licensed through the state. So for us, state of Ohio, we're licensed through the Supreme Court of Ohio. Kind of like same thing as like a registered nurse or carrying a driver's license. You have that license, allows you to get that job and hold that job and show up to courts and have your attorney number. And then if things go bad, your clients can blame you, and then people can bring lawsuits for all kinds of fun stuff, including my lawyer was negligent.
My lawyer was the guy that had me steal that bag of money.
Yeah, the lawyer hosed me.
It's professional service, just like doctor malpractice, all the same. Any professional service, I think accountants can have that. Almost any professional service can have a.
Yeah. So what about so a guy like me? I give legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not licensed or anything. Like, what can they do to me?
So it'd be the unauthorized practice of law. It's a civil matter. I don't think.
But that's if I'm actually pretending that I am a lawyer,
right?
Rather than just saying hey, I'm an idiot, and I just keep on saying stuff.
Yeah. Well, if you watch educational videos, people will say like, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, don't take this as legal or tax advice. That's what they're doing, is trying to disclose as many times as they can that you should not rely on what I'm telling you because I don't really know what I'm talking about.
Right. Right. There's no body that says so. Okay. So continuing on malpractice or I said malpractice because a Freudian slip. I'm saying, like, I know that if you sue a doctor for malpractice, it's tricky because you have to get another doctor to claim that it was negligence. And that second doctor would basically be painting a target on their back for the rest of the community. Like, everybody's going to say, it's like, don't trust that guy. He's burned other doctors. And I imagine there has to be something similar for lawyers. So before I get back to that question, order of magnitude, how many lawyers have you met? Is it thousands or is it hundreds or like?
I have no idea.
No idea?
Perhaps hundreds. Yeah, I'm sure
perhaps
it's a couple hundred for sure.
Okay. Okay. So, and how many do you know have been disbarred or sued for malpractice and lost?
Lost? Maybe zero.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody. Well, no, I know of one. We sued a guy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Here, there, yeah.
Not me and Adam, but at an old firm, we sued somebody.
And depending on your state, the Supreme Court, or they put out reports and things like that. So there's usually a little list of cases and things. So
yep,
it's a low percentage, but it does happen, unfortunately.
Really small.
Yeah. I was just guessing that because as far as as a fabric of a community, it's bound to happen, and as long as people don't play fast and heavy with the rules, then you'll be all right. Are all judges elected there? Because like over here in they're appointed. They're all appointed. So are they all elected there, or is it only some of them?
The great majority are elected. Federal judges are appointed. Local and county judges. So, Cleveland, Ohio has about 20 municipal court judges. All of those folks are elected unless someone steps down. There's certain situations where governors appoint judges for short periods of time. But yeah, anything local, state-wise, and even the Supreme Court of Ohio is elected too. And then federally, they're all appointed. They're all lifetime jobs as long as you want them.
Okay. Because that's literally a foreign concept for me, right? So I'm just curious. So so do they have to have, is it truly a popularity contest, or do they have to have any background in law whatsoever? Is it like, hey, that guy makes a mean margarita, get him on the bench? Yes,
margarita is always the threshold. Really.
Yeah.
I think all you have to be is a licensed attorney, right, Adam? There's no period of years or anything. I mean, anybody can run, and it's just like. It's no different than running for a city council or, anything else. It's, campaign and raising money and all that stuff.
But you do need some law background. It sounded like you just said.
You need to be licensed. Yeah.
Right.
You need to be a licensed attorney. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. See, that's much better.
You could run the day after you get your license if you wanted to.
Yeah. I guess you better be very popular or make a very mean margarita.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's right.
So some of these questions came from because I went through a phase in college where I decided that I only have one life to live, but I want to know more or less what everybody's life is like. And I remember I asked a lawyer I met on a train what the most unexpected part of being a lawyer was. And she said that it didn't really hit her that all you do as a lawyer is argue. And I think that that's because of the adversarial system, partially because it's negotiation. But can you talk about the adversarial system for a second?
Sure. Adam, you can.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, that is, I think people go to law school and they have an idea of what being a lawyer is. You obviously see on TV people arguing in criminal cases and that sort of thing. But even outside of that, you're negotiating and once you get in a lawsuit, whether it's civil or criminal, it's just persuasion and arguing points and trying to tell the other side this is what you should do, pay us a lot of money or walk away or whatever it might be. And it becomes a lot of arguing, especially depending on your practice area. The nice thing about the law too, though, that's also sometimes surprising to people is just how many different things you can do. So that lawyer probably spent a lot of time in court or in negotiations, and there's a lot of arguing. You also can do transactional work. You can work for a business and just legally advise them, and that's a less arguing anyway, right? You're doing more advising than arguing, and so that's a really cool thing about it too. Is that adversarial system? Yeah, it's just plaintiff versus defendant. You get the jury involved, and the plaintiff's lawyer's job is to zealously represent their client, and the defendant's lawyer's job is to zealously defend them. So that creates some level of things work out in the wash, basically, because you have one side that defendant shouldn't be, because of the adversarial system and the job of the role that we expect lawyers to play, that person shouldn't be poorly represented if things go as planned, and that kind of creates some level of fairness. And so that's kind of the idea behind the adversarial system, is to allow both sides to do what they need to do within certain parameters and rules without going overboard and cheating, whatever that means. And that's just the general idea there. And then you have a judge that's sort of calling balls and strikes for that. So, yeah. So that's an adversarial system and all the argument you get with being a lawyer. How'd I do, Paul?
Dude, really great. Yeah. and like, so we don't really, we argue if stuff goes sideways, but I mean, like what we do, I bet 90% of our time is coming to conclusions, but it's not like no one's wrong or right. You know, we just give a lot of advice on what we think is the best way to do something, but which I guess you could say is an argument, but it's more just, you know, like the name says, just advising.
There's some persuading, outcomes. But yeah, right. Persuading, but not as much pounding on the table as you get some people.
Yeah, so, and we're not jerks. I mean, we say right out of the gate, if you're looking for someone that's going to be a dick, we're not that guy. So
yeah, a Rottweiler, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. So and that's a great like threshold for me. If someone's like, oh, I need someone that's, you know, going to fight for me. One, we don't want to do court stuff anymore, so that is. But beside that, if someone's like, hey, I'm going into some lease negotiation, we want a bulldog, like, oh, good, here's, you know.
Right. And so let's parse that out a little bit then. So when you say when you say like a bulldog or whatever, basically you mean if your client wants to run somebody into the ground, leave them penniless, you know, just absolutely destroy their life, find somebody else. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. We didn't really go to law school to
pay somebody else.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Ariel question. The reason why I was asking about that is because it seemed like it encourages lying in some sense, but I don't know what kind of punishments there are. Like if you know that your opponent can't prove that you're lying, then there's nothing really legally stopping you from presenting it as truth.
Sure.
You know, like for example, let's say the only person that somebody confessed to is now dead. So you know that it'll never, well, unless a recording comes up, and then you could just say, it's like, hey, he didn't tell me.
Right.
Yeah. There's encouragement of potentially the gray area. Yeah. Twisting or half-truths, whatever you want to call it. There's a little bit of that. But there, you know, the counter is the bar association and judges will find out, you know, you're fiddling with the truth and you lose your license and you're not going to be a lawyer anymore. And
okay, so one time is too many.
Right.
Yeah. So
okay,
I mean,
cool.
So there's counters to it, but there's certainly the opportunity where people, are
in the situation where the only witness is now dead, there's no real way to get around that.
Next question. How much indoctrination goes on in law school?
You mean like
this is the way you should think about these things, as opposed to there's a lot of wiggle room on this. You know, I guess the best example I can give is I think anybody who really researches the mechanisms behind and the reasons behind why freedom of speech is so important, then you will agree. I think once you've dug into it enough, you will end up agree that freedom of speech is paramount in a society, and but that could come off as being dogmatic. It's like, nope, got to keep freedom of speech. Somebody talks about Nazis, somebody says we got to shut this guy up, and then you say, well, no, you can go ahead to tell him to shut up, but you can't make it, you know, a law to say he has to. That sort of thing would be misconstrued as being dogmatic when it actually is something that's worked out. So can you think of any things where it's like the professors put them in the ideas? So can you think of anything where it comes off as these ideas are not up for debate in any way, shape, or form, when, you know, there might be a little bit of wiggle room on if it's appropriate?
I would say that I don't know if it's indoctrination. I don't think so, because one thing, at least in my experience in law school, is that like this is like high level thinking that I think if there's anything that's kind of driven home is that if you think that this is simple or easy to figure out, here are the reasons it's not that simple, right? And the nice thing about the legal system is that as many, like you mentioned, freedom of speech is important, and there's two different, multiple different avenues for arriving there, and people who think it's very, very important, and other people who think it's important with this, limitation. So I think, in my experience, as far as indoctrination, is though like some teacher or institution is controlling how the conversation goes. I don't think that that's the case, just because it is a place where people get together and hash out why people have come to those conclusions on freedom of speech, or in cases you see the majority opinion. You also almost always look at what the dissenting or the opinion that didn't agree, the judges that dissented, have to say about the issue too. So usually you're looking at it from a bunch of different angles. And so that's why it's a great experience for anybody, just to develop your mind and your ability to think. Law school is really a great challenge there.
I think some people find it frustrating. At least I did, for certain things. It was like, can someone just tell me what the answer is so I can just move on to the next one? Like,
indoctrinate me.
Yeah, someone just tell me what to say. Like,
this is too much work.
Yeah, so I think that can be frustrating if you're not someone that likes to like negotiate or argue or come to some conclusion on your own. It's not the place for you, because it's not. I don't remember anybody. There were more maybe liberal leaning professors or conservative professors that would say maybe personal injury is kind of run wild, or medical malpractice is run wild, and we need to rein that back in. Like, that would probably be the only area that I think you could tell one like professor's leaning over the other. But overall, I mean, you can, it's a great place to use your brain if you haven't done it before. So.
Yeah. I took engineering. It sounds very, very similar, and that's something that I want to share with people in general when it comes to the scientific method and peer review, all those different communities. It's especially the ones that are academics. They're looking to make a name for themselves. And how do you do that? It's by ripping apart a fundamental idea. So everybody is trying to do that. There's a huge number of like immensely ambitious people that are trying to do it, and it's not working. That should kind of be a little bit of a hint to say, it's like, okay, this isn't a system that's just trying to, subjugate everybody. It's a lot of people with big brains, with big problems, trying to work them all out. And I think that's pretty exciting. But about the cutthroat element and being ambitious, as an example, I knew law students in college that said that other students would rip pages from the book in the library to stop others from finding the answers on the assignment. Did you see any of that, or have they digitized more than I understand to ensure everyone has access to case histories when you're in school?
I mean, when I was in school, there was definitely some of those. It wasn't. I remember there's, at least initially, we still use the library heavily, and I only graduated from being a lawyer 10 years ago. So the earlier part of law school, so I graduated in like 2009, it was like 2007 or so. We were still in the library a lot before kind of online research was. Right now, I'm sure it's all online research, but so there was some of that, or like hiding books. You had to do some of these research things where you had to find it in the library, and like, people are lame. There was cheating. I didn't really realize like drug abuse was a thing for like the bar exam and stuff. I didn't know any better until it was over.
Right.
But people are dumb, I mean, people unfortunately are very self-conscious and have a whole lot of issues. So there's all that garbage. I'm sure it's happening now as much as ever, because it's just even more pressure than it was 10 years ago to find. Yeah,
like I was saying, it's kind of a pressure cooker. So you get people who make the decisions.
Really bad choices.
So my experience wasn't that way. I actually went part-time for part of it and everything. So it's not quite, I don't think it's the day students, the full-time day students, I think, are the ones that are really tearing out a lot of pages. But anyway, but in our school wasn't quite as competitive as maybe other ones. But you hear those stories. I was not the victim of it, but it's out there.
Yeah, it never affected me. One, because I wasn't trying to be the the class
top of the class.
Not even close.
Yeah.
So, but I did hear of that stuff from afar while I was drinking coffee and not studying.
It's just, you'd know more about it if you were actually doing your assignments. If I really gave a crap, right?
If I was actually getting things done on time, I probably would have known. But yeah.
All right. So how old were you guys when you decided to become lawyers?
I was 24, I think. I'd always wanted to be a lawyer. As a little kid, I wanted to be a lawyer, but Adam mentioned earlier, we didn't know anybody. We had no family in it. I had a friend whose dad was in it, but I didn't, I wasn't bright enough to ask him any questions about what it was like. And then I graduated undergrad with a history degree just because I thought that was the funnest kind of subject to learn about. And I was like, oh, whatever I do, I'll do well enough. And then a year after undergrad was over, I just kind of cornered myself and was like, hey, I'm going to start, I need to do something productive. In our country, a lot of our, kind of most impressive people had some legal background. So I was like, oh, I should do that. It seems like a good start. And then, I just started doing the things you needed to, taking tests, applying to colleges, kind of cornering myself to do it because, it's scary if you don't know anything about something, going after it. So I'd say 24-ish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Paul, I don't know if you thought about being a teacher, but that's where we kind of came from, was in our family teachers. And I thought, I'll teach maybe high school, or whatever. And I got to college and realized, I don't know if I really want to teach high school students. So I thought, and here a lot of colleges have writing centers. So that's where undergrad students can go and get help with their writing. And I really enjoyed that. So I was an English major. And the reason I liked that was because I was like, oh, at least you talk about fun and interesting stuff, and you don't have to do stoichiometry or whatever it is you used to do in chemistry or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I did fine in school in most subjects, but I just liked English. And so I did that, and I thought, oh, I'll teach it. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll do the writing center and be a professor. So I did that. So I was teaching part-time English composition, which is just the writing course, first year writing course. And it was okay, but I just decided it wasn't for me. And Paul at the time was finishing up law school, and I was like, that seems like that's a place where you go and just talk about ideas. Why don't I give it a shot? So I took the outside. Paul has something, and he was like 8, that said he wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't consider it till at least my 20s, and kind of just copied him, to be honest. No, so it was just opened another door where I could be a little more. I like teaching, but I also like a little more practical, helping people outside of teaching and solving problems and things like that. So that's kind of what drew me toward it. But it was a little later in life, and it worked out.
Okay, so as far as fundamental, okay, so this is sort of intertwined, but can you name some things from your childhood, or even as you were adolescent, early schooling, something like that? Was there anything that you found from your youth that really helped you get through law school? Like Adam, you were talking about focusing on English, and I'm acutely aware of how studying the language itself is intertwined with law. You have to understand the roles of different words in order to make sure that these big obscure sentences are actually even making sense, and they get to their point and stuff. But so English was huge for me, for sure. First year law school was a ton easier because I had spent time thinking about how to craft a sentence and how you can rearrange a sentence and make it clear and all that. I think part of what happens when you're in a high pressure class and panicking because you aren't sure if you know the answer and all that is your writing just falls apart. That was happening, but I at least had a little background in how to write a sentence. So I think that definitely helped was that. I'd say one of the things we talk about a lot is curiosity. I think Paul and I are both curious. Paul he alluded to being in the classroom, and he wouldn't have been a very good English major. That really just beats a dead horse, as they say. You just talk about the same thing over and over. And how many different ways can we talk about the same idea? So that was a good. Writing a sentence is helpful. Being willing to go through boring ideas for a really long time, read these long cases, all that stuff. That helps. But I would say, just as a general thing, growing up, curiosity, and then just kind of we were both distance runners, so in some ways, I think that probably helps in kind of building up your ability to
stamina for
grind through things. Yeah.
No, that's what I was going to say. Was running was. We both ran in high school and college, and if you can run, 15 miles, you can get through a boring, civil procedure class. So that's probably the, discipline to get through something that's uncomfortable. It's probably the
perseverance in general. That's a part of my book that I mentioned. Is I noticed that the most capable, highly effective people that I've met they have another pattern, which is they got really good at something. And then if you get really good at least one thing, you learn how to apply that to the next thing you want. So it's basically, if you get really good at one thing, you're probably going to be really good at, like, you know, 4 things, something like that. But if you really leverage that attention to detail and the grind, which of course, you know, what is running 15 miles other than a grind? It's, you know, I usually run if somebody's chasing me, and that's about it. Right.
Someone took your wallet. Get that.
Yeah, which isn't as easy as one would think. I'm also a security guy, but whatever. So back to law in general, though, is representing yourself in court actually like the second dumbest idea after the Tide Pod challenge? Like, even if you're a lawyer?
Right. It's pretty close to the Tide Pod. You know, it really just depends. There's a lot of pro se litigants. That means you're representing yourself. Depending on the type. So if you're a business, you can't represent yourself in Ohio. You have to have a lawyer actually do it for you. But yeah, it's just better not to. It's just an unnecessary stress. So if you're trying to collect some money owed to you, or someone suing you because you owe them money, just you know, I always kind of like, if my toilet is bursting with all sorts of terrible fluids, I'm not going to do it myself. I'm going to get
really graphic
to do it. It's super graphic, but it's the same idea, right? I don't do that. You don't go to court. You shouldn't do that either. And there's even more risk in court than there is on a messy toilet. So,
right.
So anyway, don't do it yourself. It's just not worth it. It's just a ton of stress for the money you think you're saving, which you're probably ultimately going to be paying more anyway. So.
Well, and a lot of people, maybe they don't know that the loser of a court case has to pay for the expenses, at least in civil cases, right? That's always the case, isn't it?
Well, I know
in America.
Out here we don't do that as much. It's like part of filing a case is on you. So, you know, I know in Europe a lot of it is whoever wins pays for the problem. But out here, it's if you're the plaintiff, somebody owes you money, you don't, unless there's certain times when a defendant can pay for those expenses, but the great majority are just you know, everybody's on their own.
Usually the fee shifting only it comes into play when it's like fraud or a really bad act. But in general, that's one of the things that kind of discourages lawsuits. Allegedly, the idea is it discourages bad plaintiffs from bringing bad lawsuits. You know, is that they have to pay for this bad idea. So,
right. And you mentioned about how it works in Europe, and how much do you guys read about comparative law, like civil law in Europe, where it's more codified?
0% for me.
Yeah, that's the nugget I remember from law school when
that's right.
You know,
I spent 0 minutes
difference
of any day on anywhere else but here. So
one
of those ignorant Americans, you know, we don't do anything outside of our own little bubble.
You know, it's funny because every place that I've lived, you know, they all have common law or some version of it from the British system, including Taiwan. It's very Americanized. And my experience with civil law in a book of comparative laws, I read the first 2 chapters of a book on it. At least I tried at least like 6 times. It's just like, part of it was the size of the print was really bad. But anyway, let's get weird, right? I'm a polyglot. I'm a polyglot, so I have a major beef with English, which is, I mentioned a little bit about that before, but that's often, but I'm talking about how we often use fancy words from other languages to keep us as professionals safe from criticism and liability. For example, there's a certain amount of bodily autonomy that I think we lose just because the medical community uses words where even if you know, we don't know what they mean. And even if you know the parts of the words, there's still no way that you're going to know
like polyglot.
Yeah, like polyglot. Yeah. So more than 2 languages. Are there any legal terms from Latin like habeas corpus that you think should probably be translated for clarity?
Well, out here we have one. It's called a living will, which is always an ironic. It's a legal document that is your last your last declaration of how you want to be treated when you're medically failing, when you have to be on life-sustaining treatment, either, food or whatever. That one is, it's not really a complex word, but the kind of phrase is silly. So that would be one that pops out of me.
Yeah, and then just like with the legalese and the Latin phrases for a lot of things, like I think I mentioned before, but anyway, it's the law that's one place where I think lawyers have finally gotten a little more practical, and they said, why are we confusing so many people? It makes it harder on us. And so there's a little bit of a trend where that's sort of being phased out more and more, where unlike, I agree, my wife's a nurse in the medical industry, where it's just like, why are you guys making this harder on yourselves and everybody else? Where we just got to get on the same page here, isn't it?
Positive test. Wait a second.
And so it's positive. That's right. Michael Scott, exactly. Yeah. The Office. But yeah, no, I think the law is doing a little better here, where they're trying to get people to understand what exactly is going on. But it happens. But that's just the nature of it.
Yeah, I've read one. He was basically a chief justice in the UK, and I think when it comes to indoctrination and things like that, or at least one interesting little idea is there's a principle that some judges use that say that a reasonable person should be able to understand the charges against them and have some understanding of the punishments available to those who are found guilty. And that's the biggest reason that I'd want the clarity to be there. But of course, I think that interferes with the exercise of power. How commonly held or in practice do you find it is that a reasonable person should be able to understand the charges against them and the possible punishments?
I mean, over here we have felonies and misdemeanors. So if you're in big trouble, it's a felony, and if you're in just a little bit better trouble, it's a misdemeanor. So we have scales of degrees and things, and I think once you've been through the rodeo once, if you've ever gotten in trouble, you kind of get your arms around it. But if you've never been in trouble, you have no idea, kind of relatively speaking, what the difference between a 4th degree misdemeanor is and a 1st degree felony. So that whole system. But I don't know that there is a better way to do it. There's these scales of justice that it's certainly not perfect. So I think we're doing as well.
Yeah, and I think it's the complication. I mean, think about rating of the code, and those degrees are there for a reason, because you don't want to charge a person who punched somebody with murder, right? So there's a reason it's so complicated and gets a little convoluted. I don't know that there's an individual out there trying to pull the strings, but I do think that the system inherently, because of the complication of it, kind of sometimes does create some of these side effects.
Inaccessibilities.
And there's unfortunately, if you go through the process, it's really hard to unring the bell. So that's one thing that I think our country is going to start focusing on, hopefully over the next decade, is people that have gotten in trouble, at 19 years old, never being able to truly walk away from that, burst of mistake, because the way it's set up for the fines and the fees and the, inaccessibility to employment and things, it's just a terrible cycle. So once you're
housing too.
Housing's terrible. I mean, just everything is really hard. So, I think it's getting better. Your voices are getting louder. People are paying attention.
And the general education and digitalization, those are the two things that come to my mind as far as having other ways to do it. And I work on attention to detail. And one other question I had here to get even weirder, which I think is very close to law. Do you guys ever play Magic, the card game? Magic the Gathering?
Sad. I have not.
Nope.
No? Okay. The only reason why I ask is because it's just got a whole whack of rules. It's actually in the Book of World Records for the world's most complicated game. And it's just because Yeah. So every card has its own rules that change the rules, and so you just end up learning how to make all those interact into a combination that's absolutely devastating, right?
Thank you for telling me. Now I know.
Now you know. There you go. So that's my contribution. I can rest easy.
I was always
tonight.
Curious.
Always curious why I never played. I just figured it out.
I just got
exactly. There you go.
Thank you for telling me.
No problem. And while we're talking about things most people aren't interested in, ever since I read as much of Plato's Republic as I could stand as a teenager, I've been trying to learn as much as I can about the system and justice, which is like obviously where a lot of these questions are coming from. But it's always been a spare time thing. And also, I understand how law was developed. Which is what I would, as a tech guy and an ex-support guy and whatnot, I'd call it a necessary evil. And I think that you're implying that as well. So I mean that I'm going to frame it for a second and see if you can see if I'm delusional, cynical, or the most tragic option, which is right. Basically, common law is just a whole whack of precedent by people who barely needed to deal with any sort of organizational skills or accountability outside of a peasant revolt. So I'm talking about, like Middle Ages, like 1500s, 1400s, 1200s, something like that. And from what I understand, it wasn't until about 150 years ago that serious attempts to categorize the types of law even happened. And that happened when law schools were first created, which I understand was in a pub, and the first law schools were only about 130 years so far. That's a lot of stuff so far. How am I doing at this point?
Pretty good.
Okay.
I think you're right.
Okay. And I'm saying that judges and magistrates probably didn't, or they probably knew that the rules and laws of the monarch or eventually legislature, Congress, they're half baked at least 3/4 of the time. And I think there's so much backlog just because it has to be a system that's working in the world rather than, hey, let's get this all figured out and then we'll implement it once we're done. It's like, no, we need this right now. Because people are, people are doing things where they need a state endorsed decision, I guess. So am I still about right?
Okay.
Okay, so far so good. Okay, so the truth is then it's just a patchwork of decisions that came out with no real plan.
Yeah, well, it's what's interesting is like a lot of law is written on who raised their hand first, right? So. Unless a problem arose, we didn't have a law for it for a long time. Unless there was a neighbor dispute. Okay, let's focus on that issue and come up with, a law that will last a while. Who knows how long until the new facts come around that changes it. But that's the interesting thing with common law is, and it's the same with any attention of government is the attention of the government only goes to those that raise their hand and say, I have a problem. So like common law, you go to court, you only go to court if you have a problem. There's lots of interactions, probably 99% of interactions that don't require court and get worked out before then, but they could just as easily end up in court and be a different swing and a different outcome of that law. So it is fascinating, especially when it's over hundreds of years of time. So, yeah.
So yeah, I agree. It's an arbitrary. There's a bit of arbitrariness to the whole system. It's a complicated world. Imperfect humans involved. So
I need a drink.
It's a complete mess. Is that the bottom line?
It's a complete turd.
Yeah.
Time for a drink.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. All right. So final question: did you ever think you'd be on a show like this and answer questions like these?
No, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, no, it's hard to imagine, I might have had a dream about it once. Who knows? It's hard to remember.
All right.
But yeah,
cool.
man, no, this was good.
Yeah.
All right.
Cross-border
Awesome.
interview.